Hi, everybody. Okay, so this assignment, contrast of hue, value, and intensity, is appears complicated, but it's not as complicated as you think if you break it down. So the objective here is you're going to make one color look like two colors, and you're going to give me three different contrasts. And when I talk about contrast, I just mean the word difference. You're creating a difference of hue, a difference of value, and a difference of intensity. That's why it's called contrast. Of all those different things. The example above demonstrates a contrast of hue. Example, why? So if I focus here, why is this a contrast of hue? And if you look at the smaller colors here, they're the same color, as you can tell by this strip. It doesn't change. But this color on the left side appears more red than the color on the right side appears more green. Why does that happen? The two selected colors, parent colors, which are the backgrounds, yellow green, which is this one, and light red orange, which is this one, optically change the small middle color to appear more red or green on opposing background colors. Why? So that was our original question. Your eyes automatically, this is the reason, your eyes automatically create the opposite color to balance out the color you are viewing. So if we look at a color wheel, I'm going to scroll down here. There's a color wheel down here. If you look at a color wheel, the opposite side of the color wheel is, hold on a second. I'm going to use my annotation. There we go. For example, the opposite side of yellow is violet. The opposite side of orange is blue, and the opposite side of green is red, and all these other colors too. The opposite side of this is that. And a nice way I think about these colors is sometimes I'll use sports or I'll use holidays or whatever. But if you think of the green and the red, I mean, that's typically kind of Christmassy colors. If you think of the orange and the blue, I'm not a New York Mets fan or anything like that, but I know that their colors are that. And if you think of the yellow and purple, I think of the LA Lakers. So hopefully that might help. Or if you can think of your own ways of remembering these colors. These other ones, the red orange to the blue violet, they're a little bit more tricky, and sometimes you kind of need a reference like a color wheel to have around just to double check which colors are which. So that's colors on the opposite side of the wheel. So what happens is that your eye makes, so when you're looking at yellow, your eye will make a violet. When you're looking at a violet, your eye will make a yellow. When looking at a red, your eye will make a green. When looking at a green, your eye will make a red, and so forth. So it just makes the opposite color. So what's happening here is when we scroll all the way back up, the complementary hue of this green is red. So that's why this appears red. Complementary hue of this red-orange is like a green-blue, and that's why this appears more on the cool side, more on the green side. And this is a contrast of hue. It's isolating the contrast of hue. And I'll talk about value, I'll talk about all those things soon. This effect can alter the perception of smaller colors properties, which are hue, value, and intensity. In this case, hue is the major shift. So the smaller color was deliberately selected. Like, for example, you might ask, why did you choose this color? And why did you know to choose that color? I chose this color because if you mix these two colors together, they will, because they're almost complementary hues. They basically are complementary hues. These two parent colors. Let me just use my little thing here. If you mix these two colors together, right? Isn't that interesting? This green kind of changes color. It will desaturate. So if you mix a little of this orange with the green, or a little of the green with green with the orange, whatever, it will desaturate the color. So the color I chose is kind of a desaturated green. And I put that same color here, and it changed. So I chose that color specifically because I knew that these two colors, when mixed together, would create that desaturation, and it's a middle mixture. So you're often trying to use a middle mixture between the parent colors to get a good result. And that's the reason why I did that. This is kind of fun. I never did this before. Look at the arrows. Okay. Now I'm going to scroll down. And sometimes, if you're not familiar with mixing color, you might not understand that, but you're looking, whenever you mix complementary hues, look for a desaturated version of one of the parents. That's going to give you that mixture. Okay. So I basically covered that stuff. So your project objective here is you're going to successfully demonstrate the following on three separate illustration boards: contrast of hue, value, and intensity. The approach, as I just mentioned, for contrast of value, I'll get to this in a minute, but you're finding one dark value, one light value of the same hue, and then you're going to locate a middle mixture between the two values, and that's going to be the color that's going to look like 211. You do this the same with hue, and you do the same with intensity. Hue, you're just looking for two different colors on the color wheel, and I'll explain that soon. And intensity, you're looking for two different intensities, one very intense and one without intensity in some cases, or just very little intensity. The size requirements and layout, you're going to use a 7.5 by 10 inch board. Basically, if you have an illustration board that's 15 by 20, which everybody has, you're going to cut that in half and cut that in half again. You'll have 4 sheets. You'll use 3 of these sheets for this assignment. And your board will look like this. And the reason I had this out is because I want to show you that when you do break your board down and you're trying to lay out your colors, you're going to divide your board in half vertically. Just kind of go here. Divide your board in half vertically here. Of course, the green. How would I use green? I use dark red. And then you're going to divide your half and board horizontally. Okay. From there, you're going to use a full sheet of paper. You're going to lay the paper down right here, right? And then once you lay the paper down, you're going to lay the other parent paper down here in line with the vertical line that you made. And then also you want to make sure that the distance between here and here is equal to the distance between here and here. And also the distance, well, this distance will work its way out. So you might have to do a little bit of a math because the board is 7.5 inches high and the sheet of paper is 6 inches. So that gives you about 3/4 of an inch on each side. So this will probably be about 3/4 of an inch on each side of the paper. All right. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to lay out where this square is. Okay. You want to make sure that the square is perfectly centered. So you might have to both squares. You want to make sure both squares are perfectly centered. So you're going to have to measure out the distance between here and here and find the center point. For example, you want to find the center point on the illustration board from here to here. Strike a line down, just like you see here. And then after that, you can measure an inch out in this direction, a half an inch out in this direction, half an inch out in that direction, half an inch out in this direction, and a half an inch out in this direction. And that way you can draw that line around with pencil, a very light pencil, by the way. And then when you put on your 1-inch shape, you'll be able to just lay it right on that little shape. And of course, you'll do the same thing on this side. Okay. So once this is finished, you submit this in. But also the thing I forgot to mention is that, let me just clear my drawings, is adhesion. Rubber cement, you must witness a rubber cement demonstration in class, which you have done. When you're cutting, use a 6-inch metal ruler and use a rubber cement pickup eraser to clean everything when you're finished. And the paper should be fully adhered down. I shouldn't be able to get my fingernail and pick up on the edge of the paper. Okay, everything should be lay flat. When I evaluate this, I'll be looking for technical precision, perfection, straight lines, everything. Do not just throw this on there without laying it out with drawing everything out so it's perfectly and easily for you to lay down. and demonstrating knowledge of concepts. Do you have a good example of contrast of hue, another example of value, another example of an intensity? Now, for a detailed description or explanation, look down here. Talked about some of this in class. Contrast of value, when you have a middle tone on a dark background, it's going to look lighter. When you have that same middle tone on a light background, it's going to look darker, as you can see right here. So here's a good example of contrast of value. Notice that these three colors are in the same hue. And all I selected was a light tone, a dark tone, and a middle tone. And the middle tone looks lighter on the darker background and darker on the lighter background. And for a detailed explanation, please read here. For contrast of hue, you want to utilize your color wheel. And if you want a nice, easy example of contrast of hue, let's look at this one, for example. This is blue, this is violet, and this is a color that's between those two. And if you look at the color wheel, blue, violet, and this was between the two colors. So a nice, easy way to do this is you can pick two colors, right, that are one step away on the color wheel. And then you could select any of those, right? And then you can select the middle mixture. So the middle mixture between this yellow, orange, and orange would be this, I'm sorry, yellow, orange, and red orange would be a regular orange. The middle mixture between this red violet and blue violet would be a middle neutral violet, and so on. So you could try any of those combinations and see what happens. And again, you can even move these colors around. Sometimes a primary might not be a good color to use as a middle mixture, and you might want to, go from here to here, or from here to here, and then use the middle mixture. So you can kind of see how that's how I did the example below for hue. Found two colors, and you can tell this is cooler, this one is cooler, and this one is warmer. Makes sense? Okay, good. All right, I'm going to clear that out. And when you change the temperature, it changes the hue, because I would explain this one as red violet, and I would explain this one as blue violet. And that means you've changed the hue, because if you can recognize the difference on the color wheel, that's changing the name of the hue. This is the name of the hue. Now you might wonder how this works here. So this is orange, and this is kind of a blue-green, right? So this is orange, and this is a blue-green. They're almost at opposite ends, and then there's a green on here that's being used. It's like a yellow-green, kind of maybe something like this. So this works too. They're kind of opposite sides, and they're using something here to see what works. So this yellow-green looks more green here, and it looks more orange here. And the reason is because your eyes make the complementary, as I said before, hue. So the opposite of this blue is orange. And if you look at this side, or if you look at this right here, the opposite side of this blue is orange, right? Or even here. So that's why this looks orange. The opposite side of this orange is blue, right? So that's why this green, you might say, oh, well, why isn't it green? There's blue and green, so that's why it's helping that green appear more green. So that's how you're getting that effect, it's a good example. It works as well. All right, now I'm going to scroll myself down here. Now this is the more complicated one, contrast of intensity. It's easy to do, but it's hard to do if you really try to it in a more complicated fashion. So contrast of intensity. Basically, if you look at this one here, this is a pure gray, and this is a yellow greenish kind of color, right? And then there's a middle mixture between the two, a grayish yellow. This grayish yellow appears more yellow on the gray, and it appears more gray while it's on the yellow. It's clear that that is the issue, or not the issue, but the effect. When you're thinking about saturation, I want you to think about, there's something called the Munsell color system. The Munsell color system, this is just a portion of it. If I scroll down here, is kind of a three-dimensional sphere, sphere-ish, not perfect sphere, but it's sphere-ish like. And if you look at this right here, this to your left, think of this as the equator. If this is a globe, this is the equator, and the equator is the most intense color, and that's what you see. Actually, I don't know if you can see me pointing. This is the equator, and if you look right here, this is the equator line, the outermost part, central part of the globe. Think of it that way. This right here is the exact same representation of this flat two-dimensional image you see here. You can see the value scale here in the middle, and then it goes from gray and it slowly transitions into a more intense color, whereas here it's just in reverse. It's transferring, and this kind of goes with any color: blue, greens, yellows, everything. Now, let me clear this out. If I scroll up, look here, same thing. It's just kind of another version of that chart that you just saw, or the three-dimensional globe. So if I look here, the center core is vertical. As you go to the North Pole, it's white. As you go, or lighter. As you go to the South Pole, it's darker in value. As you go towards the center of the Earth, it's a pure gray. And then as you go from the center of the Earth out towards the equator line, it becomes more and more intense. So when you're looking for something, as an example, use pink. I would select something that was intense, something that didn't have any saturation, or I'm sorry, saturation to it, pure gray. And then you're trying to find that middle mixture. So that's what you look at this number 6 here. That's the middle mixture. So this middle mixture, when it's presented on the parent of the most intense color, is going to look gray. When it's presented on the gray, it's going to look intense. And that's an easy, quick way of getting contrast of intensity. So let me scroll down. And I'm going to show you another example that does this, that doesn't follow that system, but you can think about complementary hues and how they optically mix with one another. And this is where it gets a little complicated. So the one on the left you can see here is the same system we just followed. You find a pure gray, you find an intense color, you find a mixture between the two, and then it looks more yellow on the gray and it looks more gray on the yellow. Grayer on the yellow. So if you look here, this one actually appears gray. And if you look here, this one actually appears green compared to that one. Okay. When you compare them, this one is more intense. This one is more gray. Okay, let me clear that out. Now, why is that happening? Okay, this yellow-green background is different, clearly, from this slightly desaturated orange background. So these two backgrounds are different. If you were to mix a little of this orange into this gray, you would get a grayish or desaturated yellow-green, which is much like this color, or actually like this color, but which are the same color. So that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that desaturated yellow-green because you would mix these two colors. And in this particular example, when you put that color here, because of the optical mixture, because it's yellow-green, the opposite color of yellow-green is a blue-violet. The blue-violet optically mixed with the yellow-green, and it further desaturates it and creates almost a pure gray. It's a really fun example. And I know it gets complicated here, and I probably may have lost some of you at this point, but that's why that's happening. And in contrast to that, the opposite, why is this one more green compared to the other one, is because the opposite color of this orange is green. Remember, we did the New York Mets, orange and blue. I'm sorry, I just contradicted myself. But the opposite color of this orange is actually blue. But there's blue and green, right? And that's how. That's why this color is looking more intense compared to this color. It's not screaming intensity, but it is in contrast to this one. It is more intense, and that's what you're trying to create. You're contrasting one to the next. So this is a fine example. And the more you do this, the more you experiment and explore and just try things out, the more you're going to discover. There's going to be a point where you're just oversaturated of doing this, no pun intended, of this assignment, and you're going to burn out. So take a break, come back to it the next day, and try again. And I want you to show me your best examples. All right, so that is it. If you have any questions, always reach out, and I hope you enjoy the assignment.